Continue our study in the book of Genesis, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that we are picking up with chapter 23. I think we got through 22, and we will begin on chapter 23 this morning. It begins, now Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Notice how that Moses will put a marker whenever someone dies who's significant. He will say, so-and-so lived X number of years, these are the years of so-and-so. This is the same thing that he does with Sarah, because she is such a significant character up to this point in the book of Genesis. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Kiriath Arba simply means city of Arba. And notice that it's not far from, or it's in the area of Hebron. So you can sort of see where Hebrew would derive from that, possibly, even though there's no one called a Hebrew yet in the text. Still, you see the originations of different types of words and phrases. Verse 3, then Abraham rose from before his dead. Apparently Sarah is there, her body is there with him. And spoke to the sons of Heth, saying. Now, before we get into verse 4, notice the sons of Heth. It is from the sons of Heth that the Hittites rise. And you're going to see the Hittites mentioned later in this chapter. Now, the significance of that is, in the 19th century, liberal scholarship affirmed and asserted with no hesitation that the Hittites never existed. That this is one reason why the Bible is false, because there was no such empire. What Moses is talking about, or they would say the writer or writers of Genesis and the other books of the Pentateuch, when they talk about the Hittites, they're simply making it up because they never existed. Well, the archaeological spade unearthed evidence that indeed the Hittite Empire did exist. And so that was a black eye on liberal scholarship completely, and it verified what the Bible affirms. So when you read about the Hittites, you know that they were in existence. And the old affirmations of liberal scholarship went by the wayside, and the Bible was shown to be true. So, verse 4, Abraham says, I am a stranger and a sojourner among you. Give me a burial site among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Now notice this, he does not own any land there in Canaan. He doesn't own anything. He owned no land in that area. But he wants to buy a place to bury his wife there in the land of Canaan. The sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my Lord, you are a mighty prince among us. Notice that. They acknowledged the exalted status of Abraham. He had reputation and earned good reputation among the people that are outside of his clan. Bury your dead in the choicest of our graves. None of us will refuse you his grave for burying your dead. He says you had the pick. You've got the choice of whatever place you want, because we acknowledge how great of a person you are. So Abraham rose and bowed to the people of the land, the sons of Heth. And he spoke with them, saying, If it is your wish for me to bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and approach Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns, which is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence for a burial site. That indicates that Abraham already had in mind where he wanted Sarah to be buried. He had already spotted a place. He knew exactly where he wanted her to go. And so what he's telling the sons of Heth is, whatever price you ask, I'll pay it. He was expecting to pay a lot. He was expecting to pay a big price for it. He knew that this was something that would be significant for him and for his progeny that came after him. Now, Ephron was sitting among the sons of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham the hearing of the sons of Heth, even of all who went in at the gate of his city, saying. Now this indicates, since it's put in the gate of his city, that this is an official transaction that's about to take place. In the ancient Near East, the gate of a city is where everything was done that had any kind of legal ramifications. You had to do it in the gate of the city, in public view, and you had to go through a certain process. And we're about to see the process of buying a burial plot, spelled out by Moses. And some people say, why does he go in such great detail about all this? Well, it's because he's shining a light on the ancient Near East, the ancient Near Eastern world that existed in the days of the patriarchs. Notice also, backing up to verse 9, the cave of Machpelah. The cave of Machpelah, the Hebrew text there indicates it's doubling. The word there means doubling, which indicates that this is possibly a double cave. This cave is not just one cave, it's two. It's a twofer. Two for one deal, in other words. This is not just an ordinary burial cave. This is something that's more than that. And that's the reason why Abraham indicates that he's willing to pay whatever price that they ask. So he's here at the gate of the city. He's ready to do the transaction. And so Ephron says in verse 11, "No, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field and I give you the cave that is in it. In the presence of the sons of my people I give it to you. Bury your dead." He's making this formality, in other words. He's making sure that this is public, that this transaction is made known. There's no question about it. He is telling him, I give you this cave. Well, he's going to sell it to him, but that's the way that it would be phrased. He spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, "If you'll only please listen to me." There's that formality language. "I will give the price of the field, accept it from me that I may bury my dead there." In other words, there's an exchange that has to be done. In other words, Ephron says, "I'm going to give you this." Abraham says, "No, I'm going to pay you for it." "Okay, let's set the price." That's what's going on that you're seeing described. Then Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, "My Lord, listen to me." In other words, there's this exchange back and forth that's going on between Ephron and Abraham. "A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver." What is that between me and you? So bury your dead. Isn't that something? Is it, 400 shekels of silver? What's that between us? He knew that Abraham was a rich man. Abraham knew that he was going to have to pay a hefty price for that cave. And he indeed did. 400 shekels of silver is a big purchase price. If you do the math, which I'm not great in math, so somebody else will have to do it for me. If you're great in math and you do the computation, 400 shekels of silver is a hefty sum in today's language. So, verse 16, Abraham listened to Ephron. And Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver which he had named, the hearing of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, commercial standard. Now the King James has it phrased differently. The Hebrew text indicates this is commercial standard. In other words, what Moses is telling us is all of this is exactly as it should be legally. Legally, socially, everything is being followed to the letter. Even the haggling between Abraham and Ephron was done exactly as it was expected to go. And notice that Abraham was in no position to haggle about the price. He was in no position to do that. Because he knew, and you know that Ephron knew, that cave, that double cave, was worth every penny or every shekel that Abraham was going to pay for it. So he couldn't try to knock him down a bit. Abraham was too much of an honest man to do that, number one, but also he was fully aware of what he was buying. He knew it was prime real estate. And so he was ready to do it. Verse 17 then says, So Ephron's field, which was in Machpelah, which faced Mamre, the field and cave which was in it, and all the trees which were in the field that were within all the confines of its border were deeded over to Abraham for a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth, before all who went in at the gates of his city. So Moses describes to us exactly what Abraham's purchasing. It's not just the cave. It's not just this double cave that he's going to use to bury Sarah and then later he would be buried in. It's also the piece of land, the field, that is, that was around that cave, and the trees. The trees were a part of this deal. Now, Moses doesn't go into extreme detail to tell us exactly what kind of trees they were, but they had to have been trees that were worth something. That is, that could be used for other purposes than just decorative purposes. So everything that was in this purchase was mentioned by Moses here. And notice that it's fully public, the presence of the sons of Heth, before all who went at the gate of his city. So in other words, everything is up and up. Everything is legal. Everything is as it should be. Abraham's paid full price. Now he has his burial plot. And verse 19 then says, After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah facing Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So apparently, even though Moses doesn't say it explicitly, apparently there is always some sort of embalming process that has taken place for Sarah, for her to be able to lie in state, as it were, in the presence of Abraham, and for all of this transaction to happen, and then they take her body and bury it in the cave. So there's some sort of embalming that has taken place that Abraham was able to oversee up to this point. So verse 20 says, The field and the cave that is in it were deeded over to Abraham for a burial site by the sons of Heth. This is the first land acquisition in Canaan by someone who is a follower of the one true God. After Abraham's arrival in this area, he has never purchased a plot of land. He's always been a sojourner. And that's how exactly the Hebrews writer would describe him, that he was just traveling from place to place. He had a huge entourage. He was an extremely wealthy man, but he owned no property. Now he owns property, a burial plot. And it's the first acquisition by any follower of Jehovah there in the land of Canaan. That's significant. Any questions or comments about what we've just read before we get into chapter 24? There's a lot of legalese, if you want to put it that way, that Moses includes here in chapter 23. He is a stickler for detail, and he does a great job of including things that we sometimes would overlook, all the details of this transaction that happened. Chapter 24. Now Abraham was old, advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. Can that be said about us when we are advanced in years? That when we are old and advanced in age, that the Lord has blessed us in every way? I think if you sit down and think about it, as the old song says, count your blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. You'll be amazed at the things that the Lord has provided for you. Verse 2, Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned. Moses does not name who this servant is. Likely, and this is speculation, likely it was Eliezer. Eliezer was a trusted servant of Abraham. So we have to assume this is who he's talking about. Verse 2, he told him, please place your hand under my thigh. Now, that seems strange to us. Place your hand under my thigh? Why? Next verse explains, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live, but you will go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac. So when you place your hand under my thigh, you swear to me. So that gives you a tip-off that this is not just something haphazard that Abraham's doing. This, that is putting the hand underneath the thigh of the one that's making you pledge, this is symbolizing making a solemn pledge. If you're making a solemn pledge that cannot be broken by either party, then you place your hand under the thigh, and then you make that pledge. So, he wants to take a wife for his son Isaac back into his country. Verse 5, the servant said to him, suppose the woman is not willing to follow me to this land. Should I take your son back to the land from where you came? Then Abraham said to him, beware that you do not take my son back there. Well, don't take Isaac back there to Mesopotamia. Why? Because it would represent a retreat from the promise of God. God had told Abraham in the long ago, get you from your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, and go to a land that I will show you. If Abraham sent his son back to Mesopotamia, that would be a retreat from what God had said originally. Abraham realized that. No, we're not sending Isaac back there. No. You're going to get a wife for him, but he's not going there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and who swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land, he will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. So the Lord is going to be assisting Abraham's servant in the process of finding a wife for him. He is going to send out his angel. His angel is going to give him help on that. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this my oath, only do not take my son back there. So, his parameters are clear. You're going to Mesopotamia to find a wife for my son Isaac. If she refuses, then you're free from this pledge, you're free from this promise. But Isaac's not going. He's not going there to find a wife. You're going to find it for him. So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swore to him concerning this matter. So this pledge is made. The pledge is made between Abraham and his servant. Then the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master and set out with a variety of good things of his master's in his hand, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia to the city of Nahor. And here the liberal scholars raise their hand and say, point of order. There are no camels in the ancient Near East. And to that we say, what? Because there is evidence that there were camels in the ancient Near East, as opposed to what liberal scholars have said in the past. And so that objection is not made nearly as much today as it was in years gone by. But still, that's one thing that they would raise an objection to concerning the inspiration of Scripture and the veracity of Scripture. But in any case, 10 camels, that was the price for a bride. Now, I know that you've gone to the zoo, either here in Montgomery or Birmingham or maybe Atlanta or other places, and you have seen camels. Just don't get too close to them because they'll spit at you. And some people have found that out to their chagrin. But still, camels are big animals. They're huge animals, and kids love to see camels. But camels were an important piece of property. If someone possessed camels, then they had a leg up on a lot of individuals. And so Abraham had some camels to spare, and he sends them as the purchase for a bride, and set out with a variety of good things of his master's in his hand. So Abraham doesn't just give him camels, he gives him all sorts of goodies to take to the family to be able to get a bride and bring her back. And he went to Mesopotamia. Literally, Aram Naharim. Aram Naharim means Aram of the two rivers. The two rivers being the Tigris and the Euphrates. If you're familiar with your geography, you know the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers are in modern-day Iraq. They flow directly into the Persian Gulf. So this is where we're talking. Tigris and Euphrates, this area, Ur the Chaldees, where Abraham is from. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw water. He said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now may it be that the girl to whom I say, please let down your jar so that I may drink, and who answers, drink, and I will water your camels also, may she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. And by this I will know that you have shown loving kindness to my master. So this servant asked the blessings of God to help him on this. He had to have had servants, because one man couldn't control 10 camels by himself. He had to have some people to help him. But in any case, he has these camels to kneel down. And they're right by this source of water. He knows this is the moment of truth. You know, is the woman going to come out? And is she going to reveal herself as to these parameters that he's put forth? Before he had finished speaking, before he even finished the prayer to the Lord, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. Now, we've been introduced already to Rebekah back on the end of chapter 22, when they're talking about the descendants, or those who have been born to his brother Nahor. And Rebekah is named particularly in that lineage. So this is the Rebekah that we've already been introduced to, by name that is. So, here she comes. She is the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin, and no man had had relations with her. And she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. So this servant spots her. This has got to be her. This has got to be the one. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please let me drink a little water from your jar. She said, drink, my lord. And she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw also for your camels until they have finished drinking. So the parameters have been met. Here's the woman. This is the one that he's going to bring back with him, hopefully, for Isaac. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. So he's sitting back and he's watching all this. He's watching her run back and forth, watering the camels, doing exactly as he had prayed to the Lord about, still not aware that she is kin. That is, she's kin to Abraham, and she's kin distantly to Isaac. So, verse 22, when the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel. We're not talking about costume jewelry. This is something that's worth something. And 2 bracelets for her wrists weighing 10 shekels in gold. This is expensive. Now this ring that he mentions in particular, this gold ring that weighs half a shekel, we're going to be told in verse 47 that this is a nose ring. It's a nose ring that he pulls out because of what was going to be said later on in verse 47 of this same chapter. So this nose ring, 2 bracelets weighing 10 shekels in gold, and said, whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room for us to lodge in your father's house? She said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. Clicks in his mind, in other words. Oh, okay. This is kin. This is kinfolk. We're doing good still in his mind. Again, she said to him, we have plenty of both straw and feed and room to lodge in. Then the man bowed low and worshiped the Lord. He has the spirit of his master. First thing he does, he bows and he worships Jehovah. Then he said, verse 27, Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth toward my master. As for me, the Lord has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brothers. He knows he's in the right place. He knows he's got the right person. Then the girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. This must have been overwhelming to Rebekah. She wasn't expecting all this. As a result of watering this individual and his camels, all of a sudden, whoa, what is this? And getting a ring and getting bracelets. And he's talking about the Lord. So she goes back and tells her family. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. And Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. When he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, saying, "This is what the man said to me," he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. So he's already been told by Rebekah exactly what had happened. He knows exactly what she had said to him. And he said, "Come in, blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside, since I prepared the house and a place for the camels?" So the man entered the house. Then Laban unloaded the camels, and they gave straw and feed to the camels, and water to wash his feet, and the feet of the men who were with him. So we know now from what Moses explicitly says that indeed he had servants. This servant of Abraham had assistants with him to handle all of his matters. And verse 33 then says, "But when food was set before him to eat, he said, I will not eat until I have told my business." This servant of Abraham was so excited to get this thing nailed down and locked down that he said, "I'm not going to eat. I've got to take care of this. This has got to be done." So he said, "Speak on." And so he said, "I am Abraham's servant." When he said that, "I am Abraham's servant," that must have thrilled the family that were there. How long had it been since they had seen anybody from Abraham's entourage? "The Lord has greatly blessed my master, so that he has become rich. And he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and servants and maids and camels and donkeys. Now Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master in her old age, and he has given him all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I live, but you should go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son." Now they're fully aware of what his intent is. "I said to my master, Suppose the woman does not follow me. He said to me, The Lord before whom thou have walked will send his angel with you to make your journey successful. And you will take a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my relatives, and if they do not give her to you, you will be free from my oath." So he tells them exactly what had transpired between he and Abraham to get them aware of what this circumstance is. All of what's taking place. "So I came today to the spring and said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if now you will make my journey in which I go successful. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and may it be that the maiden who comes out to draw, to whom I say, Please let me drink a little water from your jar, and she will say to me, You drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord had appointed from a master's son. Before I had finished speaking in my heart," notice this, "before I had finished speaking in my heart." What does that indicate? That indicates that this prayer from the servant to the Lord was a silent prayer. It was not a verbal prayer. Sometimes when we talk about prayer, we say, does a prayer have to be uttered openly for it to be a valid prayer? Well, no, you can pray without actually speaking words. As long as you have your mind focused on the Lord and you know what you're saying, you're not saying it out loud, but you're saying it to yourself. That's exactly what's taking place here with this servant of the Lord. He says it in his heart. So, he says, "Behold, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder, and went down to the spring and drew. And I said to her, please let me drink. She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, drink, and I will water your camels also. So I drank, and she watered the camels also. Then I asked her and said, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. And I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. So that tells us that that ring, that half-shekel ring, was a nose ring that he put on her. You say, nose ring? Well, yeah, it's jewelry. So this was part of it that Abraham had sent along with him. And I bowed low and worshiped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had guided me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. So now, if you're going to deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me. And if not, let me know, that I may turn to the right hand or the left. In other words, I got to know what I'm doing here. Is this going to happen or not? Are you in agreement with this or are you not? Before we go any further with this, I've got to know what you think. Then Laban and Bethuel replied, the matter comes from the Lord, so we cannot speak to you bad or good. In other words, this is determined by Jehovah. We can't make our judgment on it. Here is Rebekah before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. Well, it's not just that this woman fulfills the parameters of what this servant had asked, and also fulfills the parameters of what Abraham was intending for his son. Now the family themselves, they're in agreement with this. Yes, if the Lord is wanting you to do this, then take her. That indicates to me that at the least, Laban and Bethuel were not in the tradition, if you want to put it that way, of Abraham's father. Remember, Abraham's father Terah was an idolater. We know that from what Joshua would later say about him, looking back. Terah was an idolater. That explains why Terah did not go with Abraham all the way to Canaan. He turned back and went to Ur. Well, apparently, Laban and Bethuel didn't follow in the steps of Abraham's father. They were at least acknowledging the one true God, and the supremacy of the one true God. And they gave no indication here that they were worshiping, at the least, idol gods. And so they were very much in sync with what this servant of Abraham was telling them about it being the Lord's will. So verse 52. When Abraham's servant heard these words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord. How thankful this servant is. Every time something happens that goes right along with what the Lord desires and what Abraham desires, he bows and he worships God. How many times do we give thanks and acknowledge God for all the good things that he continues to do for us? How many times do we acknowledge him for the good in our life that happens? How many times do we acknowledge him for the tests that come our way? That is, thanking him for those things that take place. It's something we need to really give notice to. So verse 53 then says, the servant brought out articles of silver and articles of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. So Abraham has sent a haul of stuff with him. This is a big amount of a lot of expensive jewels and clothes and different things to give to the family. This is a price of a bride in the ancient Near East. You've heard of a dowry. Well, this is in essence what this is. You're paying the family to allow them to send or to give their daughter or their female relative in marriage to an individual. This is what's taking place. Again, you're talking about a legal transaction that has to happen for a marriage to be recognized in society, but also it's something that has to be done just to be in good graces with the family themselves. So all of this is happening just as it should. Verse 54, then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. So they had not eaten, they had not drank until all of this happens. In other words, the implication is that if all of this had not taken place as we have it described, that is, if the family were not willing for Rebekah to be married, then we have to assume that that servant would have just gathered up his things and taken his servants and went back, because he wasn't about to waste his time if it wasn't going to happen. So now they sit and they eat and they drink. Now they can finally relax because the transaction's taking place. Rebekah is going to be the wife of Isaac. When they arose in the morning, he said, "Send me away to my master." He's wanting to go. He's not wanting to waste any time. He's wanting to go back home, go back to Abraham and quickly finish this. But her brother and her mother said, "Let the girl stay with us a few days, say 10. Afterwards she may go." He said to them, "Do not delay me. Since the Lord has prospered my way, send me away that I may go to my master." He's thinking, obviously, if we delay this thing, she may change her mind. She may change her mind and decide to stay home and not go. And they said, "We will call the girl and consult her wishes." So they're speaking for her at first, and let's see what Rebekah says on this. Then they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will go." Rebekah's ready. She's ready to go into a place she's never been, to a man she's never met, even though he's kinfolk, and marry him. She's already seen from this servant that they are a very deeply religious family. They're worshipers of the one true God. She has now also seen that Abraham, the servant's master, is extremely wealthy, so she's going to be taken care of, no question about it. And that they really judge character. In other words, the implication being that the Canaanites are of low character. Abraham does not want his son to marry a woman from the Canaanites because he knows that's going to drag him down. But he's fully aware of his kinfolk back home. He knows that they actually have a tendency toward, at the very least, worshiping the one true God. So that tells her that these are people of high character. I don't have to worry about being with them. So all those factors enter into her mind, obviously. And there comes a point when a young man or a young woman reaches a certain age that they're ready to leave home. They're ready to go out on their own, as much as it pains us fathers and mothers when our children leave the house. There comes a point, it happened with us when we were young, where you leave home and strike out on your own. And that's exactly what Rebekah's doing here. She's now knowing it's time. It is time to do what I want to do. And so she agrees. Verse 59 then says, "Thus they sent away their servant Rebekah and her nurse with Abraham's servant and his men." So Rebekah's not by herself on this. Rebekah's got her own personal nurse with her. That indicates that her family's not poor by any means. Her family has means if they're able to have her a nurse that she can travel with her, and so she does. Verse 60, "They blessed Rebekah and said to her, 'May you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gates of those who hate them.'" That was their wish. We want you to have a lot of offspring, and we want your offspring to be successful. Then Rebekah arose with her maids, and they mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now, Isaac had come from going to Bir-lahai-roi, for he is living in the Negev. Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, camels were coming. So, he's out there in the field by himself meditating. And then he hears this commotion and sees these camels, and of course he has to know. That's the servant. He's returning. So he's returning back. Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. That tells me that Isaac was a good-looking guy. Rebekah is a good-looking woman. And she knows she's going back with him to marry somebody. She sees this young man out in the field meditating, and apparently he's got strikingly good looks, and she gets off her camel. She said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "He is my master." Ah, her intuition was exactly correct. This is the man. This is him. And what is her reaction? Then she took her veil and covered herself. Now we think of a veil, we think of something like a doily on top of the head or a veil that goes down just to the face. No, 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 no. This veil was a full body veil. It covered the face, the torso, and the bottom part. This is a full veil that she pulls over herself. By the way, we'll come back to that concept of the veil when we go further into this, talking about Jacob and thinking that he married Sarah, and it turns out he marries Leah. That factors into that, by the way. So, it's covering her face and body. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So the purchase price to the family's been paid. The transaction's been done. She's been brought to Canaan, and now the formality of a marriage has taken place. The wedding, if you want to call it a ceremony. There has to be some sort of recognized ceremony in public for society to acknowledge that a marriage has happened. And this is exactly what takes place. The marriage takes place, it's consummated, and now Isaac and Rebekah are united. So, that sets everything up when we continue our study next week for the death of Abraham and Isaac then. The scene is now shifting over to Isaac. We've been looking at Abraham up to this point. Now we're going to shift over to the next patriarch, Isaac, who is significant in this story that Moses tells through inspirations. That's where we'll go in our study next week.